Tonight, cracking down on alcohol in the Spencer Gulf. Mandatory ID checks for takeaway booze in Port Augusta and Whyalla. And conditionally approved by council, a brand new hotel is coming to Broken Hill with dozens of rooms on the cards.
From our 7 Spencer Gulf studios, your nightly news with Madeline Kerr begins now.
Good evening, thanks for joining us. The Liquor and Gambling Commissioner has imposed mandatory ID scanning for takeaway alcohol purchases in Port Augusta and Whyalla. Liquor volume purchases have also been limited to reduce alcohol abuse and the transportation to dry communities.
No ID, no liquor. That's one of the new rules for purchasing takeaway alcohol in Port Augusta and Whyalla. The restrictions came into effect on Wednesday, requiring ID for purchases that will be scanned and kept in data storage for 24 hours.
So the idea behind the ID scan system is that once someone buys alcohol at one venue, it's recorded across Port Augusta or across Whyalla, and therefore it stops people going from venue to venue to purchase alcohol, particularly where we're seeing people selling that alcohol.
The ID system is similar to ones already in use in Western Australia and the Northern Territory, where communities are also fighting alcohol abuse.
In relation to the issue of people buying for other people, that is a concern, but we are working with the licensees and the police to identify people who may be doing that and looking to bar those people from being able to buy alcohol at all.
Volume sales in Port Augusta and Whyalla have also been restricted, including limits to 2 bottles of wine or spirits in Port Augusta, while Whyalla has limits including 1 bottle of spirits and 1 cask of wine or port. The restrictions have gained support from Port Augusta City Council candidates.
Alcohol is a health problem, basically, and it's in the interests of everybody to be able to regulate the amount of alcohol that they consume. And if that takes regulations and laws, then it's a good thing. We need to show that we're a city that's more interested in many other things than just alcohol.
Daniel Pizarro, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
At last month's ordinary meeting, Broken Hill City Council conditionally approved the construction of a new hotel. The new accommodation is long overdue and will be a welcome change after the city experienced a busy tourist season this year, which even saw glamping on the ovals.
The new hotel will be built on Argent Street, chosen for its central location. The development has received council's tick of approval with some additional conditions.
A bit of shielding on the balconies to make sure there's privacy there, both for people that will be staying there and residents. Also some parking requirements.
Not only does it help solve the accommodation shortage Broken Hill suffered during this year's peak season, it also gives the community and other investors confidence in the old town.
Potentially opens up the doors to other development. What you want to do as a council and a community is make sure that you welcome people and welcome investment into your city.
The City Council saw the 52-room proposal as a no-brainer, as the Silver City continues to welcome people from far and wide.
So it's a win-win. I hope it happens as soon as it can happen, because as soon as they can get it to progress to the next stage and start building, because it will be a real benefit to the community.
The construction of a new hotel may also help with growth in other areas of the city.
And it could eventually cause the growing of our airport and an increase in the size of the jets that come into the city.
This week, Broken Hill came in at number 14 on Australia Travellers magazine's Top Towns of 2022 and may move higher with everything happening.
You know, to even make the list of any of those sorts of things, it's pretty impressive. But I could imagine that Broken Hill over the next few years will move up through that list and get higher and higher.
Joshua Mercer, 7 Spencer Gulf News.
In the final week before voting closes in the 2022 local government elections happening across the Spencer Gulf, the Electoral Commission has released the figures of returned ballots by council areas, showing the leaders and those who are trailing behind.
Regional areas are leading the way, with some councils nearing the 50% mark of ballots returned.
From an anecdotal point of view anyway, local councils have a much bigger role in the lives of people in regional and rural South Australia than they do in the cities.
Regional councils often have a broader role and have more say when it comes to childcare, aged care and healthcare. This is why the leading council areas are places like Franklin Harbour, Peterborough and the Flinders Ranges. No vote means having no say.
Look, voting's really important, and it's the only way that we have as citizens to actually be able to have our say in what's going on in our local communities.
Councils are responsible for everything from road, rubbish, pathways and the organising of events. And with less than a week to go, the Electoral Commission hopes the number of voters increases.
With council elections, we tend to see about 32% participation rate, so that's the number of people sending their ballots back.
Voting is a simple, quick process. And if you have lost your ballot paper or didn't receive one, it's not too late to take action.
You need to call our call centre on 1300 655 232. We can do that over the phone.
Happy voting. Annabelle Francis, 7 Spencer Golf News.
Still to come tonight, a shake-up to sample club zones, except in the Eyre Peninsula. And a star for a star. Performer and producer and Port Augusta legend Ethel Anderson honoured at a ceremony. Welcome back. A Port Lincoln man will face court after he was allegedly caught drink driving. Police will allege that around 2:30 on Saturday morning, police pulled over a Ford sedan on Tennant Street. Here, the driver underwent a blood alcohol test, which allegedly returned a positive reading of 0.141. The 29-year-old local man was reported for drink driving and was issued with a 6-month instant loss of licence. He will appear in Port Lincoln Magistrates Court at a later date. The South Australian National Football League has completed its 2022 Boundaries Commission review, resulting in some major changes for clubs' recruiting zones. The review is conducted every 5 years to ensure club zones meet the population and participation changes in both metropolitan and country areas. As for the Eyre Peninsula League, the Norwood Football Club will still hold claim to this zone. For West Adelaide and Central Districts, their recruiting zones have received a boost. The River Murray Football League, which was once a part of Sturt's Country Zone, will now go to West Adelaide. Scouts have wasted no time ahead of the 2023 season, snatching up some young, talented prospects. A local Port Augusta figure was fondly remembered over the weekend. A star and a plaque was unveiled for Ethel Anderson, renowned performer, producer and instructor at the Lear Memorial Theatre ahead of this year's pantomime.
Spanning generations, the community gathered to commemorate one of the town's greatest entertainers, Ethel Anderson OAM. Flanked by family, the ceremony officially saw the unveiling of a locally produced star, as well as a plaque for the late founder of the Anderson Dancers, with former Red Gum lead singer Don Schumann doing the honours.
I think she'd be secretly very proud, and she deserves to be. I mean, her contribution to the community was absolutely extraordinary.
For Ethel's children, Ken Anderson and Lindy Madigan, the unveiling was an emotional one, but a poignant moment for their mother, who passed away last year.
As a family, we're that proud, it's not funny. And Anderson Dancers is, has been her life for 52 years, as well as the rest of the community work she's done, and very proud. This is a great tribute to her on behalf of the Anderson Dancers. It's been amazing.
I think Mum, as always, would be very humbled. Mum was never one to sprout her achievements, and she would have loved that everybody was here today, but she would have wondered what all the fuss was about and why it was all about her.
Tomorrow night, the Anderson Dancers' 51st pantomime will begin, the first production since Ethel's passing, but her legacy continues.
We've got some fantastic cast this year. We've got some fellas who can show their dancing skills off in some fabulous dresses, and we've got lots of children and adults. It is a show for everyone. It isn't just a show for families of dancers. It is a show for everyone.
Daniel Pizarro, 7 Spencer Golf News.
Stay with us after the break. The South Australian Law Reform Institute checks in with senior residents in Port Pirie. And the Perth to Sydney car rally cruises through the far west, stopping by Broken Hill. Welcome back. Earlier this year, the South Australian Law Reform Institute, based at the Adelaide University Law School, were asked to conduct an independent statutory review of the Ageing and Adult Safeguarding Act. And Port Pirie residents had their say.
In May, the Institute travelled to Port Pirie to conduct a consultation at the Uni Hub, saying it's important to consult as widely as possible.
To understand the perspective of those communities, because quite often issues of law, practice, particularly access to services, are very different for regional and rural communities than they are for Adelaide.
Salary was interested in the extent to which the Act is achieving its purpose, and there's two parts to it. First is the Office for Ageing Well, which helps older people stay connected in the community, stay active and healthy, and receive resources and support about ageing. The second part is the Safeguarding Unit, which helps those who suspect abuse is happening.
And sadly, there are very real issues, as we know, from many royal commissions and highly publicised cases of abuse and exploitation.
Through consultation, major themes that emerged were the regional access to resources and gaslighting and emotional abuse.
A lot of the people in the regions are worried about, well, are we going to get face-to-face access? Are people going to come and actually speak to us, or is it going to be dismissed because it's too far to travel?
Salary made a total of 46 recommendations for various changes to the law, and now it's up to the state government to decide what they do with them. Annabelle Francis, 7 Spencer Golf News.
After stopping in Port Augusta, the Perth to Sydney car rally has made another stop in our region, this time in Broken Hill. 70 cars arrived yesterday afternoon and set off bright and early this morning to continue their cross-country trek.
All it took was a dive into the archives to get the Perth to Sydney Marathon up and going again.
Well, the rally came about from finding a newspaper article on the 68 event in 2018 for the 50th, which was the 50th anniversary.
The weather had played havoc early on in the marathon, with alterations made to the route as the drivers made their way into Port Augusta 2 days ago. Fortunately for the drivers, it was blue skies in Broken Hill.
From a point of view of the camaraderie, the friendship, the support of all of the participants, it's running really, really well. I'm pretty sure that they're all enjoying it.
The event has been 4 years in the making, with a smaller scale event being held in New South Wales and Victoria before this one.
It took us 4 years to plan it, to drive it, to get all the approvals across the country, and now it's happening, and it's just fantastic.
Robert Williamson was a young boy when the London to Sydney Marathon came through Broken Hill. Today his company Lodestone Mines is sponsoring the event.
I was a 7-year-old standing on a corner here in Broken Hill when they came through, and so it was important for me, I think, to support what is a reenactment of the London to Sydney from all those years ago.
The 5,700 kilometre journey is spanned out across 10 days. They're off to Menindee next, then down to Victoria, before crossing the finish line in Sydney. Joshua Mercer, 7 Spencer Golf News.
Stay with us after the break. Port Pirie Mayor Leon Stevens and the rest of our fishing experts reveal their tips for anglers this weekend. And starting to warm back up, we'll have the weather details with Grace Evans. Welcome back. With the weather set to warm up by the weekend, there are plenty of fish biting out around the Spencer Gulf, and even further out if you prefer to fish off a boat. Let's kick this week's Fish and Tips segment off with Jamie Crawford in Port Lincoln.
G'day and welcome to Fishing Tips in Port Lincoln. We'll start locally in the bays here, and there's been some really good whiting reports coming through from over the past week, with some nice fish caught in the proper, out around Boston Island and up at Louth Bay as well. There's been some really nice garfish and a few tommies as well in Spalding Cove. There's also been some salmon trout cruising around in the bay with fish up to around about 1 kilo. In Coffin Bay, the bay system's been fishing pretty well for tommies and gar, a few salmon trout, and there's a few snook inside the bay as well. The farm beach grounds are still fishing pretty well for whiting, but most crews are moving around to find their fish. That's all for tips this week. We'll see you again next week.
Welcome another week around the Gulf Fishing Tips. It's really interesting at the moment. I've been hearing lots of stories about kingfish over on the Lowly Rip, so it's a good opportunity if you've got great weather coming up, beautiful sunny day on Saturday and Sunday. Take a chance to go over there. While you're there, just look around the top end of Ward Spit and also in Eastern Shoal around the south side of that thing. There'll still be some good sized King George whiting hanging around. We've looked at Woods Point. That's still working well, and if you go out a little bit further west from Woods Point, you should get bigger fish as we speak. But don't forget, this is the time of year where we get a lot of snook, and we've got some salmon starting to float through at the place, so always have a shot with that, and the odd squid are still available. So great fishing this weekend, make the most of it. We'll see you next week.
G'day and welcome to this week's fishing tips from Port Augusta, Jewel of the North. Well, that winter season's certainly come back in. There's still kingfish around. Actually, there's a lot of kingfish up around the top of the Gulf. A lot of people trolling up around the old or the crossover bridge there going to Whyalla. So that's been fairly popular, and there has been a few caught down at the powerhouse or the old powerhouse side as well. And you can bet they'll be around at Port Patterson, probably even Chinaman's Creek as well. Tides have just gone into Dodge as well, so there's not a real lot of tide flow at the moment. King George whiting can't really be found at the moment, and the first few trumpeters are starting to show up. Still some crabs to be found out a little bit deeper, and they're still getting a few squid down on the shacks there as well. On one of those nice calm nights, try and get out in amongst the mangroves and try and dab them for a few garfish. You'll pick up a feed. That's all we have from the Jewel of the North.
Speaking of a good catch, Grace Evan joins us for a look at all the weather details across the Spencer Gulf. Grace, how was today?
Maddie, you are too kind. Well, it was wet in parts of the Gulf today, but showers quickly eased. Kadina, Port Lincoln and Cleve all recorded under 1 millimetre, but it's nice to have a bit of rain while we still can. Taking a look at some of today's temperatures now, 21 degrees in Woodna, peaking quite late in the day at around 20 to 4. Just 15 degrees in Clare today after an overnight low of 8.4 degrees. Cooper Pedy reached 23 degrees, also quite late in the day. Looking more broadly at today's weather map, 21 the top in Port Augusta, just shy of 18 degrees in Port Lincoln. Port Pirie reached 19 degrees at 3:08. Broken Hill topped 18 degrees, 17 in Kadina and Adelaide. Taking a look at the satellite image now, a high pressure system will become established south of the Bight tonight. This high will move to the east to be over the Tasman Sea by Saturday. Over the weekend, winds will tend northerly. Moving on to tomorrow's weather outlook now, and we'll start with the Gulf waters. Variable winds about 10 knots becoming southwest to southeasterly, 10 to 15 knots in the afternoon. Sea below 1 metre, south to southwesterly swell around 1 metre, increasing up to 2 metres. Partly cloudy in Port Lincoln tomorrow, between 8 and 19 degrees. Slightly warmer in Cleve, heading for a top of 21. Warmer in Woodna, 24 degrees on Friday after getting down to 5 degrees tonight. Partly cloudy, 22 in Whyalla tomorrow, 24 degrees in Port Augusta, the Jewel of the North, 21 degrees in Kadina, partly cloudy. 23 degrees in Port Pirie, partly cloudy conditions as well. Clare heading for 19 on Friday, becoming cloudy around Broken Hill, 20 degrees with some light winds around. Taking a look further through the week now, partly cloudy conditions across the region. Maximum temperature will be 30 degrees up in Cooper Pedy, 29 in Woodna, 28 in Port Augusta, 27 in Whyalla and Port Pirie, 23 over the board in Broken Hill. Moving on to Sunday's forecast now, and take a look at all those sun icons. Beautiful warm conditions to end the weekend. 33 in Cooper Pedy, our hottest centre on the map. Not far behind is Woodna with 32 degrees. Port Augusta also cracks the 30s on Sunday, 27 in Broken Hill, Kadina and in the capital. And finally, taking our first look at how Monday is shaping up, and the summer-like conditions continue into the working week. Partly cloudy and 35 in Woodner and Cooper Pedy, the opal capital of the world. Blue skies and 32 degrees in Port Pirie, 27 in Port Lincoln, 29 in Broken Hill. And that's all the weather from me tonight. I'll see you a little later with an update. It's back to you, Maddie.
Thanks for that, Grace. And that's the local news this Thursday. I'm Madeline Kerr. From all of us here, thanks so much for joining us. I'll have updates a little later, but until then, enjoy your evening. Good night.